In today's lesson, we'll be reviewing area. The equation for area of a rectangle is length times width. This is the length, while this is the width. Equation for area of a triangle is 1/2 times base times height, or base times height divided by 2. You get the exact same answer for both equations. This is the base, while this is the height. The height must make a 90-degree angle with the base. In other words, the base and height must be perpendicular. The equation for area of a parallelogram is base times height. This is the base, and this is a height. Again, the base and height must meet at a 90-degree angle. In other words, they must be perpendicular. The equation for area of a trapezoid is a plus b, then multiplied by h, then divided by 2, or 1/2 times the sum of a and b, then multiplied by h. Again, you'll get the same answer with both equations. This is a, this is b, and this is h. Again, h and b must meet at a 90-degree angle. In other words, they must be perpendicular. Finally, the equation for area of a circle is pi times r squared. Pi is equal to 3.14, and r squared is the same thing as r times r. As you can see over here, this is the radius, which is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside of the circle. Diameter is just twice the radius. In our first example, we want to determine the area of the rectangle. If you recall, the equation for area of a rectangle is length times width. I like to use a handwritten L so that it is not mistaken for a number 1. 3 centimeters is the width, while 10 centimeters is the length. Therefore, we're going to start with our equation. So area is equal to length times width. So the length is 10. We're going to put that in brackets, and the width is 3, and we're also going to put that in brackets. When you have two brackets beside each other without any operation in between them, that is multiplication. So 10 times 3 is 30, and the units is centimeters, and because this is area, it is 30 centimeters squared. In our second example, we want to determine the area of the triangle. If you recall, the equation for area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. Or you can use the other form of the equation. It doesn't really matter. 5 yards happens to be the base, while 10 yards happens to be the height. Remember, they must meet at a 90-degree angle. They must be perpendicular. Therefore, we are going to be putting numbers into our equation. So, instead of b, I'm going to replace that with 5 in brackets. And instead of h, I'm going to replace that with 10 in brackets. And the divide by 2 stays exactly the same. So 5 times 10 is 50. The divide by 2 stays the same. And 50 divided by 2 is 25. The units is yards. And because this is area, it is going to be 25 square yards. In our third example, we want to determine the area of the parallelogram. If you recall, the equation for area of a parallelogram is just base times height. 4 feet is the base, while 5 feet is the height. Remember, the base and height must meet at a 90-degree angle. In other words, they must be perpendicular. Let's begin by rewriting our equation, which is base times height. So instead of writing b, I'm going to replace it with a 4 in brackets. And instead of writing h, I'm going to replace it with 5 in brackets. So 4 times 5 is 20, and our unit is feet. And because this is area, we need a square. So this is 20 square feet. In our fourth example, we want to determine the area of the trapezoid. The equation for area of a trapezoid is the sum of a and b multiplied by h, then divided by 2. As you can see, 4 centimeters happens to be a, 10 centimeters happens to be b, and 6 centimeters happens to be the height, or h. And remember, the height and the base must be perpendicular. In other words, they must meet at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to start this question by rewriting the equation for area, which is a plus b in brackets multiplied by h, then divided by 2. So instead of writing a, I'm going to replace it with 4 in brackets. The plus sign stays exactly the same. I'm going to write 10 in brackets instead of b. And instead of writing h, I'm going to write 6 in brackets. That's going to be all over 2. So we now need to do bed mass. So according to bed mass, you need to do whatever's in the brackets first. 4 plus 10 is 14. Everything else stays the same. What you could do next is multiply. So we can multiply 14 by 6, which happens to be 84. The divide by 2 stays exactly the same. And 84 divided by 2 is 42. The units we're using is centimeters, and it needs to be squared since we're dealing with area. So the area is 42 square centimeters. In our last example, we want to determine the area of the circle. If you remember, the equation for area of a circle is pi r squared. 7 feet is the radius, while if you recall, pi can be approximated to be 3.14. Let's begin by rewriting our equation, which is pi r squared. Instead of writing pi, let's write 3.14. And instead of writing r, we are going to write 7 in brackets. According to BEDMAS, we need to do the exponents first. So 7 squared is the same thing as 7 times 7. And 7 times 7 is 49. Now we can go ahead and do multiplication. We can multiply 3.14 times 49, which happens to be 52.14. The unit is feet, and because this is area, it's going to be squared. Therefore, the area is 52.14 square feet.